Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a totally fascinating and, honestly, deeply complex situation unfolding on the ground right now in 2026. We're going to take a completely data-driven, objective look at two simultaneous, totally contrasting realities happening in Israel and the Palestinian territories. On one hand, you've got one of the most ambitious national building projects in the region's history, but on the exact same timeline, we're seeing record levels of structural demolition and human displacement. So what's really going on? Let's figure out the mechanics driving both of these realities.
Okay, let's dive straight into the first reality, the official government blueprint. It's called Infrastructure for Growth 2026. And wow, this is a massive multi-billion shekel public works initiative spearheaded right out of the Prime Minister's office. We're talking about a comprehensive blueprint that pulls in 16 different government ministries. The goal? To aggressively modernize the country's transportation, energy, and housing networks over a 5-year stretch.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the blueprint for growth, then look at the record demolitions and displacement, zoom in on the flashpoint of East Jerusalem, break down the legal and administrative tools at play, and finally bring it all together to look at these two infrastructural realities.
All right, part 1, Blueprint for Growth, Investing in the Future. Now, the financial scale of this vision is just staggering. We are literally talking tens of billions of shekels pouring into totally transformative transit and highway systems. Just look at those top numbers. The M1 through M3 subway lines over in the Gush Dan region, those are estimated at 30 billion shekels each. Then you've got the Tel Aviv Green Line and the Jerusalem Blue Line light rails coming in at over 31 billion combined. So yeah, this isn't just patching up potholes. This is a massive infrastructural overhaul meant to fundamentally change how millions of people move around.
To really grasp the why behind all the spending, we just have to look at the government's stated goals. Dorit Steinmetz, the acting director general at the Prime Minister's office, called this infrastructure development, quote, the central economic engine of growth for the Israeli economy. So, from the government's point of view, these huge investments are absolutely crucial. They see them as the key to increasing productivity, maximizing economic potential, and improving the daily quality of life for citizens, especially when you factor in the broader security challenges in the region.
But there's another side to this coin. Let's move to part 2, record demolitions and displacement, the second reality. See, during this exact same time frame, if we want to truly understand the landscape of 2026, we have to look at data tracked by the United Nations, and the numbers show a very different reality. Between 2009 and early 2026, a stark 14,332 Palestinian-owned structures were demolished across the West Bank and East Jerusalem. That is a hard, inescapable number, and it creates a real visual whiplash when you compare it to the massive building boom we were just talking about.
And naturally, tied directly to those 14,000 demolished structures is the human toll. That translates to 22,638 displaced people over the same period. According to the UN data, we're not just talking about empty sheds here. These demolitions include residential homes, water and sanitation facilities, and agricultural buildings.
If we zoom in on the most recent data, the trend is actually speeding up. 2024 literally broke historic records for demolitions in East Jerusalem. We saw 255 total structures leveled in that year alone, and 181 of those were people's actual homes. Plus, human rights groups on the ground report that this aggressive trend has pushed right on into 2025 and 2026.
Which brings us to part 3, Flashpoint East Jerusalem, where two realities collide. Now, there are specific places where these two completely different tracks physically crash into each other. Take the Silwan area right outside the old city walls. There's a proposed King's Garden archaeological tourist park managed by an organization called Elad to showcase biblical history. But that planned park sits directly on top of the existing Palestinian neighborhood of Al-Bustan, meaning 115 homes are currently under threat of demolition just to clear the land for this new tourist site. To put a human face to these statistics, consider Fakhri Abu Diab. He's a 62-year-old community leader in Silwan whose own family home was actually demolished by Israeli authorities because it lacked the proper building permits. Today, he and his wife are living in a small trailer right there in the courtyard, literally on top of the rubble of their old house. As he puts it, he views this as a deliberate effort to take land for settler gardens and parking, effectively erasing his family's history in the area.
But looking at the other side, we have the direct counter perspective from Israeli officials. Take Aryeh King, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. He absolutely rejects any accusations of ethnic displacement. In fact, he refers to the displaced residents as squatters, who are illegally occupying property that he says was originally purchased by Jews during the British Mandate, way before 1948. So from the municipality's viewpoint, they aren't displacing people, they're simply enforcing the law and reclaiming historical property. We also see this happening at a broader institutional level. Just look at the timeline for the UNRWA's East Jerusalem compound. It really shows how fast policy shifts turn into physical changes on the ground. In October 2024, Israel banned the UN Relief Agency from operating, accusing its staff of having ties to militant groups. By January 2025, the agency was ordered to completely vacate the premises over alleged unpaid property taxes. And then, fast forward just 1 year to January 2026, and bulldozers were physically inside the compound, leveling the buildings.
Okay, part 4, legal and administrative tools, the mechanisms of change.
So the crucial question here is, how exactly does this happen? What are the bureaucratic levers that allow for massive state-sponsored construction on one side and widespread demolitions on the other? Well, the primary legal trigger is something called an administrative demolition. This happens when a structure is built without a municipal permit. The city maintains that it's just enforcing standard zoning laws, plain and simple. However, urban planners and various NGOs report that the system is essentially rigged against Palestinians. They argue that getting a legal building permit in these neighborhoods is basically impossible, which forces residents to build illegally just to have a roof over their growing families.
And there's a newer, even stricter tool at play here called the Settlement of Land Title, or SOLT. See, in the past, Palestinians could submit a building plan if a local community leader gave consent, a system known as the Mukhtar Protocol. But the government scrapped that. Now they require formal, rigorous proof of land ownership through SOLT. And because this new administrative hurdle is so high, only 57 residential plans for Palestinians were approved in all of 2024. That is a huge drop from previous years, and it's essentially put the brakes on any Palestinian community growth.
So when you boil it all down, the core conflict looks like this. The municipality stance is strictly legalistic. They are enforcing zoning laws and upholding what they see as historical property rights. On the flip side, the Palestinian and NGO stance asserts that the legal system itself is inherently discriminatory, acting as a deliberate, calculated policy of dispossession and displacement. And perhaps the most brutal administrative reality to come out of all this is something known as self-demolition. Here's how it works. If the municipality sends in its own bulldozers to destroy your legal home, they will hit you with an absolutely exorbitant fee for the service. Take 60-year-old Omar Abu Rajab, for instance. He was fined 64,000 shekels. So to avoid total financial ruin, many residents, including Omar and his young nephews, are literally forced to pick up sledgehammers and tear down their own homes by hand.
Which brings us to our final section, 2 infrastructural realities, the 2026 landscape.
If we zoom out to look at the big picture of everything we've just covered, it's clear that the story of 2026 is defined by these 2 parallel, totally contradictory narratives, both operating in the exact same physical space. On one side, you have the government's bold, optimistic vision. Subways, high-speed rail, brand new highways, all fueled by billions of shekels to promise economic resilience and modern connectivity. Yet at the very same time, just miles down the road, bulldozers and sledgehammers are dismantling thousands of homes, fundamentally reshaping the demographic map through administrative law. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. We are basically watching 2 highly efficient machines running simultaneously, one building things up and one tearing them down. As billions of shekels build a bright, state-of-the-art future for some, while thousands of structures are reduced to rubble for others, how will these parallel tracks ultimately shape